Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. Last Christmas Eve, everything in my life fell apart. I came home from work at the shop a little late because some guy's radiator decided to quit on him at 4 p.m., and I couldn't just leave him stranded. I figured I'd miss a bit of the Christmas movie marathon Lana planned with Haven and Mila, our two girls. They're 9 and 6. Still believe in Santa and everything. I didn't want to miss them opening their Christmas Eve gift, which is always matching PJs, but I figured there'd still be time for cocoa and cuddles. I walked into the house, and something felt off right away. No laughter, no smell of cookies, no sound of Jingle Bell Rock on repeat. Just silence. I called out, "Lana? Girls," and all I heard was the echo of my own voice. Then I saw it. A folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter, held down by her wedding ring. My stomach dropped. I don't even know how I managed to open it with my hands shaking like they were, but I did. The note was short, barely a couple of lines. Mitch. I can't do this anymore. I need to find myself. Take care of the girls. Lana. That was it. No explanation, no warning. Nothing. I stood there, staring at it, trying to process how my wife of 10 years just up and left me and our kids without so much as a conversation. The girls were upstairs in their room, already in their matching pajamas, looking at a book together when I went up. Haven asked me why Mommy wasn't in the kitchen, and I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to your daughters that their mom just walked out? I didn't tell them the truth that night. I said she went to visit a sick relative and would be back soon. I couldn't crush them like that on Christmas. That night, after tucking them in, I sat on the couch with the note in one hand and her ring in the other, just trying to make sense of it. Did I miss the signs? Was she unhappy, and I just didn't see it? The worst part was knowing I'd have to tell the girls eventually. And that's how my new life started, with a broken heart, 2 confused little girls, and a note that left more questions than answers. The days after Lana left were a blur. Christmas morning came, and the girls woke up excited, thinking their mom would be back. Haven asked if we should wait for her to open presents, and I had to lie through my teeth. I told them she got stuck with her sick relative and wouldn't make it back in time. I didn't know how long I could keep that story going, but I wasn't ready to face the fallout. We did our best to have a normal Christmas. The girls opened their gifts, and I plastered on a smile. I even managed to help Mila assemble her Barbie dream house without breaking anything. But inside, I was a mess. Every time I glanced at the couch where Lana should have been sitting, it felt like someone was squeezing the air out of my lungs. When the holiday passed, reality hit hard. I still had to go to work. Bills didn't stop just because my wife decided to ghost us. I took the girls to Mrs. Florence, our neighbor, and she offered to watch them while I worked. Bless that woman. She acted like she'd been waiting her whole life to step in and help. Said her grandkids were all grown and she missed having kids around. The first week back at the shop was brutal. I couldn't focus. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was Lana. A text, a call, anything. But it never was. Just customers, my mom checking in, or spam. I tried calling her, once, twice, probably a dozen times. Straight to voicemail every time. I left a couple of messages at first, but what do you even say to someone who abandons their family? That Friday, I finally told Haven and Mila the truth. Well, part of it. I told them Mommy needed some time away, but that she loved them very much. Haven's face fell, but she nodded, like she was trying to be strong. Mila cried and clung to me, asking when Mommy was coming home. I didn't have an answer. It wasn't just the emotional side of things, I was drowning in logistics. I didn't realize how much Lana did around the house until she wasn't there anymore. Grocery shopping, laundry, making sure the girls' backpacks were packed for school, all of it landed on me. And let me tell you, I had no clue how to braid hair until YouTube became my best friend. But as hard as it was, we started to find our rhythm. The girls leaned on me more, and I tried to step up. I started leaving work an hour early so I could pick them up from school and help with homework. Dinner was mostly frozen pizzas and spaghetti, but they didn't seem to mind. Mila even told me my cooking was better than Mommy's. I almost laughed. Almost. Every night, after they were in bed, I sat on the couch and stared at that note. Some nights I was angry, others I just felt numb. A part of me thought she'd come back any day. Another part of me wasn't so sure. All I knew was that I couldn't fall apart. I had 2 little girls depending on me. It didn't take long for people to notice Lana was gone. Small towns are like that. Nothing stays a secret for long. By the second week, folks were stopping by the shop with their concerned faces, pretending they needed an oil change just to ask questions. "How's Lana doing? Haven't seen her around," Mrs. Pritchard asked one morning as she lingered by her Buick. "She's fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Visiting family for a while." Mrs. Pritchard gave me that knowing look, the one that said she wasn't buying it. She didn't press, though. Not everyone was that polite. "I heard she left you," Sam, one of the regulars, blurted out a couple of days later while I rotated his tires. I froze for a second, gripping the wrench like it was a lifeline. He must have noticed because he muttered, sorry man. None of my business." "You're right. It's not," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. But the damage was done. People were talking, and it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. The hardest part was running into Lana's old friends. They'd pull me aside in the grocery store or at the gas station, their voices dripping with pity. "If you need anything, Mitch, just let us know," they'd say, like they were signing a guest book at a funeral. I hated it. Every word felt like a reminder of how much I'd failed. Failed to see it coming. Failed to keep her from leaving. Failed to keep my family together. The girls weren't blind to it, either. Haven came home one day and asked, "Daddy, why did Mrs. Taylor say Mommy's not coming back?" I had to sit her down and try to explain, again, that I didn't know when Mommy would be back, but that we were going to be okay. Mila overheard and started crying again, which set Haven off, too. I hugged them both tight, telling them we were a team now, just the 3 of us. It broke my heart to see them hurting, but I couldn't fall apart. Not in front of them. Meanwhile, I was trying to keep my own emotions in check. Every time I saw a family walking hand in hand down the street or heard a couple laughing over coffee, it felt like someone was rubbing salt in the wound. I started avoiding places Lana used to love, her favorite cafe, the park where we used to take the girls. It was too much. But as the days turned into weeks, something started to shift. The pity looks turned into genuine offers to help. Mrs. Florence kept watching the girls after school, but now she was sending them home with casseroles. My buddy Joe started swinging by the shop to see if I needed an extra hand, even though he didn't know a carburetor from a catalytic converter. And the girls? They started smiling again, little by little. I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. The community was rallying around me, even if I didn't ask them to. It didn't make the pain go away, but it gave me hope. Maybe, just maybe, we'd get through this. It was about a month after Lana left when the letter showed up. Not a text, not a phone call, a letter, like we were living in the 1800s. It came in the mail, folded neatly in an envelope with my name on it. Seeing her handwriting sent a jolt through me. For a split second, I thought maybe she was coming back. I waited until the girls were asleep before opening it. I didn't want them to see me if I broke down. The letter was long, pages, actually. But it didn't make much sense, just a lot of vague flowery words about needing to find herself and feeling trapped. She wrote that she loved the girls but couldn't be the mom they needed right now. There was one line that stuck with me though, and not in a good way. "Please don't try to find me." Like I was some stalker or something. I don't know what hurt more, her leaving or the fact that she thought I'd ever try to force her to come back. She left us. Not the other way around. The more I read, the angrier I got. She didn't even ask how the girls were doing. No apology, no explanation for why she picked Christmas Eve of all days to bail. It was just a lot of me. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. I wanted to rip the letter up, burn it, anything to stop seeing her words on the page. But I couldn't. Not yet. I sat on the couch with my head in my hands, trying to calm down. I thought about calling her, but what was the point? She made it pretty clear she didn't want to hear from me. I ended up pouring myself a drink, something I hadn't done since she left, and stared at the letter until my eyes burned. The next morning, I folded it up and put it in a drawer. I didn't want Haven or Mila stumbling across it. They didn't need to see what kind of person their mom had become. For now, it was just one more thing I'd carry on my own. Life didn't stop though. I still had to get the girls to school, fix cars, pay bills, and figure out what we were having for dinner every night. If I focused on the day-to-day stuff, I didn't have time to dwell on the letter or the emptiness Lana left behind. That became my strategy: keep busy, keep moving. But deep down, a part of me wondered, was she really gone for good? Or was this just her way of testing the waters, waiting to see if we'd fall apart without her? Either way, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let her ruin us. Not me, not Haven, and not Mila. We were stronger than that, even if we didn't feel like it yet. After Lana's letter, I threw myself into making sure life for Haven and Mila stayed as normal as possible. Normal, of course, didn't really exist anymore, but I tried. Breakfasts were pancakes or cereal, always with their favorite chocolate milk. I started setting reminders on my phone for things Lana used to handle: picture day, parent-teacher conferences, even packing extra snacks on field trip days. It was overwhelming, but I was determined not to let anything slip. One night, Haven came into the living room while I was folding laundry. She looked so grown up standing there in her fuzzy slippers, holding one of Mila's blankets. "Daddy," she said softly, "when is Mommy coming back?" I froze for a second, the sock I was holding halfway folded. I'd been dreading this conversation. "I don't know, sweetheart," I admitted, setting the laundry aside and pulling her onto my lap. "But I promise, no matter what, I'm here for you and Mila. Always." She didn't cry or get upset, just nodded and leaned her head against my chest. That moment broke me in ways I can't even explain. My little girl was already learning to be stronger than she should have to be. Meanwhile, Mila had started acting out in her own way. She threw tantrums over the smallest things: spilled milk, a lost crayon, even a mismatched pair of socks. It was like she was testing how much she could push before everything fell apart. I didn't blame her. At 6, how else do you process your mom walking out? One day, she refused to go to school. She stood at the front door, arms crossed, her little face set in a defiant pout. "I'm not going. Mommy always takes me to school," she said. I knelt down to her level, trying to keep my voice calm. "I know, Peanut. But Mommy's not here right now, and we still have to go." She stomped her foot, tears welling up in her big brown eyes. "No. I want Mommy." I pulled her into a hug, even as she squirmed to get away. "I know you miss her," I said, my throat tight. "I miss her too. But we've got to be strong, okay? For each other." Eventually, she let me carry her to the car. She didn't say a word the whole ride, but when we got to the school, she gave me a small, reluctant smile as she grabbed her backpack. It wasn't much, but it felt like a win. At the shop, things were starting to pick up again. Regulars came back, and word got around that I was offering discounts for single parents. I figured if anyone knew how tough it was to do this alone, it was me. Joe, my buddy, stopped by one afternoon with burgers and fries from the diner down the street. "Thought you could use a break," he said, plopping the bag down on my workbench. "Thanks, man," I said, wiping grease off my hands. He leaned against the wall, watching me tighten a bolt. "You're doing okay, Mitch. I don't know if anyone's told you that, but you are." I didn't answer right away, just kept working. It felt good to hear, but it didn't change how heavy everything still felt. "One day at a time," I finally said. "One day at a time," Joe agreed, clapping me on the shoulder. That became my mantra. One day at a time, one foot in front of the other. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't pretty, but we were making it work. The girls deserved that much. Just as things were starting to feel somewhat manageable, reality decided to slap me in the face. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was helping Haven with a math project while Mila colored at the kitchen table. Everything was calm, almost normal, until there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a man in a suit holding a clipboard. He introduced himself as some kind of legal representative, but I barely caught his name. All I heard was, "I'm here on behalf of your wife, Lana." My chest tightened. "What does she want?" I asked, gripping the doorframe. He glanced at his clipboard and cleared his throat. "She's exploring her options for custody." Custody. That word hit me like a freight train. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me so the girls wouldn't hear. "She left us," I said, my voice shaking. "She abandoned her family. And now she thinks she can just come back and take my kids." The man didn't flinch. "She claims she's been seeking professional help and is ready to resume her role as their mother." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She didn't even have the guts to call me herself, just sent some guy to drop this bombshell on my doorstep. "Tell her," I said through gritted teeth, "that if she wants to fight for custody, she better be ready for one hell of a battle." He handed me a folder and left without another word. I stood there for a long time, staring at the papers. My hands were trembling so bad I almost dropped them. Finally, I shoved the folder into a kitchen drawer and went back to the table like nothing had happened. The girls didn't notice anything was off, but my head was spinning the rest of the night. What did Lana want? Was she really trying to take Haven and Mila from me? Or was this some kind of bluff? I didn't sleep at all. By morning, I knew I needed help. Legal help. I reached out to Ren, a guy I went to high school with who became a lawyer. We weren't exactly close, but he'd always been fair and straightforward, the kind of guy who didn't beat around the bush. I figured if anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. Ren agreed to meet me at his office after work. As I explained the situation, he took notes, his expression serious. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "She's got some nerve," he said. "You're telling me," I muttered. "Here's the thing," Ren said, leaning forward. "Abandonment doesn't exactly paint her in a good light, but if she can prove she's stable now, a judge might give her some rights. Maybe not full custody, but visitation." The thought of Lana waltzing back into our lives after everything she'd done made my blood boil. "I can't let her hurt the girls again," I said, my voice cracking. Ren nodded. "Then we'll fight. I'll file the necessary paperwork to protect your custody and make sure she can't pull any stunts without facing consequences. But Mitch, you've got to be prepared for this to get messy." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. Messy didn't even begin to cover it. When I got home, the girls were asleep, and the house was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with a cold beer, staring at the legal folder Lana had sent. This was just the beginning, and I had no idea what she had up her sleeve. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to let her take Haven and Mila from me. Not without a fight. The days after that visit were tense. I was constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every knock at the door or unfamiliar car in the driveway had me bracing for some new curveball. The girls, thankfully, were blissfully unaware of what was brewing behind the scenes. Ren moved fast. He filed papers to establish my custody rights officially and requested a restraining order to prevent Lana from showing up unannounced. He told me it wasn't a guarantee, but at least it would show the court I was serious about protecting the girls. A week later, the first real blow came. I got a notice in the mail. Lana was petitioning for joint custody. Not full custody, but enough to get her foot in the door. She claimed she'd been in therapy, working on herself, and was ready to be a mother again. I didn't buy it. Not for a second. "She's playing the sympathy card," Ren said when we went over her petition. "Saying all the right things to make the court think she's turned her life around. Is that enough?" I asked. Ren gave me a look that said what I didn't want to hear. "It depends on the judge. But we're not going to let her rewrite history without a fight." The first court date was set, and the weeks leading up to it were some of the longest of my life. I started documenting everything, every interaction with the girls, every time Mila asked why mommy wasn't around, every time Haven got quiet and sat out of nowhere. Ren said it would help our case, and I wasn't taking any chances. The girls were my world. The thought of sharing them with Lana, of letting her disrupt the fragile stability we'd built, made me sick. When the day finally came, I dropped the girls off at Mrs. Florence's and drove to the courthouse. My stomach felt like it was tied in knots. Ren met me outside and gave me a firm pat on the shoulder. "Stick to the facts," he said. "Be calm, be honest, and let her actions speak for themselves." The courtroom was sterile and intimidating. Lana was already there when we walked in, sitting with her lawyer. She looked different. Polished, like she was trying to present herself as the picture-perfect mother. But when she saw me, her face twisted into something colder. The hearing wasn't dramatic, not yet. It was mostly procedural, setting the stage for what was to come. Lana's lawyer argued that she had the right to see her children and that she'd been working hard to be in a better place. Ren countered by laying out her abandonment and how I'd been the sole caregiver since she left. The judge didn't make any big decisions that day, but he scheduled a full custody hearing for a few months down the line. In the meantime, he granted Lana supervised visitation once a week at a neutral location. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Supervised, Ren reminded me as we left the courthouse. That's a win for now. It shows the court doesn't fully trust her yet. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like the first crack in the foundation I'd worked so hard to rebuild. That night, I sat Haven and Mila down and told them Mommy would be visiting soon. Mila's eyes lit up, and she squealed, "Really? Mommy's coming back." Haven, though, just crossed her arms and stared at me. "Is she staying this time?" "I don't know, sweetie," I said honestly. "But for now, she just wants to spend some time with you." Haven didn't say anything, but the look on her face told me she wasn't buying it. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, wondering how this was all going to play out. The day of Lana's first supervised visit was a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't know whether to be angry, nervous, or sad, so I settled on all three. Haven and Mila were buzzing with questions. What will Mommy say? Will she play with us? Does she still like peanut butter cookies? I didn't have answers, but I smiled and told them everything would be fine. The visit was scheduled at a family visitation center downtown. It was a sterile, overly cheerful place with brightly painted walls and shelves packed with toys that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. The girls were excited, even Haven, though she tried to hide it behind her usual cautious demeanor. When Lana walked in, looking all put together in a crisp blouse and skinny jeans, Mila ran to her immediately. She hugged her tight, tears streaming down her cheeks, babbling about how much she missed her. It was heartbreaking. Haven, though, hung back, standing next to me with her arms crossed. She was watching Lana like she was trying to figure out if this was real or just another disappearing act. "Hi, sweetheart," Lana said, kneeling down to Haven's level. "I missed you so much." Haven didn't move. "You didn't say goodbye." Lana's face faltered for a split second, but she recovered quickly. "I'm so sorry, Haven. I made a mistake, but I'm here now. Can I have a hug?" There was a long pause before Haven finally gave her a quick, stiff hug. It wasn't the reunion Lana was hoping for, but it was all Haven could give. The visitation supervisor, a kind woman named Diane, stepped in and introduced herself. "Let's give the girls and their mom some time to reconnect," she said gently. I nodded and left the room, though every part of me wanted to stay and make sure Lana didn't say or do anything to hurt them. I sat in the waiting area, staring at my phone but not really looking at it. Every now and then, I caught bits of laughter or the sound of Mila's little voice through the door. It was a strange mix of relief and jealousy. I wanted my girls to be happy, but I hated that Lana could still light them up like that after everything she'd done. When the visit ended, the girls came out with Diane, their faces flushed and happy. Mila chattered nonstop about all the games they played and how Lana promised to see them again soon. Haven was quieter, but she didn't seem upset, just thoughtful. Lana didn't say much to me as she walked out, just a small, tight smile. I didn't smile back. On the drive home, Mila kept talking about the visit. "Mommy said she's been really busy but wants to spend more time with us now," she said, clutching a drawing she made during the visit. Haven finally spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "Do you think she's really staying this time, Daddy?" I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I don't know, Haven. But no matter what, I'm here, okay? We'll figure it out together." That night, after the girls were in bed, I called Ren to give him an update. "It went fine," I said, pacing the kitchen. The girls were happy to see her. "Good," Ren replied. "But keep documenting. Every visit, every reaction from the girls. We need to show the court that their stability matters more than Lana's sudden change of heart." I hung up feeling drained. I didn't know if Lana's return was genuine or part of some plan to paint herself as the perfect mom in front of the court. Either way, I had to stay focused. For the girls, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The supervised visits became a regular thing, once a week like clockwork. Each time, Lana would show up looking polished and put together, her smile wide and eager. At first, the girls seemed thrilled. Mila's hugs were tighter, and her laughter came easier. Even Haven started warming up, though she still kept Lana at arm's length emotionally. But as the visits continued, I noticed a change, small things at first. Mila started asking me questions that didn't sound like they came from her. "Why don't you and Mommy live together anymore?" she asked one night as I tucked her into bed. I paused, caught off guard. "We just need to live in different houses right now," I said carefully. "Mommy said it's because you were too mad at her," Mila added, her voice small. My stomach twisted. "She said that?" Mila nodded, already half asleep. "She said you have a hard time forgiving." I didn't know what to say. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light, but her words stayed with me long after she drifted off. It didn't stop there. Haven, who'd been cautious from the start, Started asking pointed questions, too, questions I knew weren't hers. Why can't Mommy stay the night? She said you won't let her. Did you tell Mommy she couldn't live with us anymore? Mommy said she misses being a family. Do you miss her, Daddy? It was like Lana was planting little seeds, trying to turn the girls against me in her subtle way. I couldn't believe it. She had the nerve to walk out on us, and now she was trying to rewrite history to make herself look like the victim? I vented to Run during one of our calls. She's manipulating them, I said, pacing the living room. She's twisting things to make herself look good and make me the bad guy. Ren was quiet for a moment before replying. It's a common tactic in custody cases. She's trying to create doubt, make the court think you're being unreasonable or withholding access. But it's not true, I snapped. I know that, and you know that, Ren said calmly. But the court doesn't know that yet. Keep documenting everything. If the girls repeat something Lana says, write it down. We'll need it. I hung up feeling helpless. How was I supposed to fight someone who was willing to use our daughters as pawns? The next week, it all came to a head during a drop-off. Mila had forgotten her favorite stuffed bunny at the visitation center, and she was inconsolable. I promised her we'd go back and get it the next day, but it didn't help. As I buckled her into her car seat, Lana approached me. She leaned in close, keeping her voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said. I straightened up, my fists clenched at my sides. Excuse me. You're poisoning them against me, she accused, her tone icy. They're my daughters, Mitch. They deserve to know both parents love them. Don't you dare talk to me about love, I shot back, my voice barely above a whisper. You walked out on them. On Christmas Eve, Lana. You don't get to lecture me about what they deserve. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. Instead, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. That night, I sat down and wrote everything in my notebook, Mila's questions, Haven's comments, even the conversation at the visitation center. I didn't know if it would make a difference in court, but I wasn't taking any chances. Lana could play her games, but I wasn't going to let her win. Not when my girls were the ones caught in the middle. About 2 months into the supervised visits, the cracks in Lana's act started to show. Mila came home one evening quieter than usual, clutching her bunny tightly to her chest. I tried to get her to tell me what was wrong, but she just shook her head and buried her face in my shoulder. Haven, always more observant than her years, pulled me aside later. Mommy and Mila had a fight, she whispered. I frowned. What kind of fight? Mommy got mad because Mila didn't want to draw a picture for her, Haven explained, her voice low. She said Mila was being ungrateful. My blood boiled. Lana had no right to guilt-trip Mila, especially after everything she'd put her through. But I kept my anger in check, not wanting to scare Haven. Thanks for telling me, sweetie, I said, pulling her into a hug. The next morning, I called Run. She's pushing too hard, I told him. It's like she's trying to force the girls to act like nothing happened. It's a common tactic, Ren replied. She's trying to create a narrative where she's the victim of your hostility and the girls' confusion. Document everything. That became my routine. Every night after the girls went to bed, I wrote down every detail of their visits with Lana, every comment, every change in their behavior. It was exhausting, but I couldn't risk missing anything. The breaking point came during one of Lana's visits at the center. I was waiting in the lobby when Diane, the supervisor, came out with a tense look on her face. Mr. Carter, she said, motioning for me to follow her. I stood up, my heart racing. What's going on? It's Mila, Diane said quietly. She got upset during the visit and refused to participate in the activities. Your wife didn't handle it well. What do you mean? I asked, my stomach sinking. Diane hesitated. Mrs. Carter raised her voice and accused Mila of being difficult. It escalated to the point where Mila started crying and asked to go home. I didn't wait for her to finish. I marched to the visitation room and found Mila curled up on the floor, clutching her bunny. Lana was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, looking frustrated. Mila, I said gently, crouching down beside her. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home. She threw her arms around my neck and clung to me like a lifeline. You're overreacting, Lana snapped as I picked Mila up. She needs to learn she can't act like this. I shot her a look that could have cut steel. Don't you dare tell me how to parent after what you've done. I walked out without another word, Mila still clinging to me. Diane followed us to the lobby, apologizing and promising to include the incident in her report. On the drive home, Mila didn't say much, but she wouldn't let go of my hand. Haven, when we got back, wrapped her little sister in a big hug without saying a word. That night, I sat down with Ren and told him everything. This can't keep happening, I said. The girls are already dealing with enough. They don't need her making it worse. Ren nodded, his face serious. This incident works in your favor, Mitch. It shows the court that Lana's not putting the girls' needs first. We'll push to limit her visitation or even stop it altogether if this pattern continues. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Lana could try to twist things, but the truth was starting to catch up with her. Lana's tactics weren't subtle anymore, and the girls were starting to feel the strain. Mila was clingier, constantly asking if I was mad at mommy or if I didn't like her anymore. Haven, on the other hand, became quieter, retreating into herself in a way I hadn't seen before. One evening, after another visit, Haven sat at the kitchen table, poking at her dinner. Mommy said she wants us all to live together again, she said quietly, not looking up. My heart sank. What else did Mommy say? That you won't let her, Haven muttered. Her voice had an edge of frustration that stung more than I expected. I took a deep breath, kneeling down beside her. Haven, that's not true. This isn't about not letting Mommy do something. It's about making sure you and Mila are safe and happy. That's all I want. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes searching mine. Are we going to have to pick, Daddy? Between you and Mommy? Her question hit me like a punch to the gut. No, sweetheart. You'll never have to pick. I promise. Later that night, after the girls were in bed, I called Run. This is getting worse, I told him. She's putting thoughts in their heads, and they're starting to doubt me. Run sighed. We'll address it in court. Judges don't take kindly to parental alienation, especially when it involves young kids. Just hold steady, Mitch. You're doing everything right. I wanted to believe him, but it was hard not to feel like the walls were closing in. As Lana's visits continued, something surprising happened. Haven started asking to spend more time with Mrs. Florence. At first, I thought she just enjoyed baking cookies or hearing Mrs. Florence's stories about the good old days. But one evening, as I picked her up, Mrs. Florence pulled me aside. She talks about her mom a lot, she said, her voice low. And about you. She's a smart girl, Mitch. She knows more than she lets on. I tensed. What's she been saying? Mostly questions, Mrs. Florence said. She asked why her mom would leave if she loved her so much. And if it's okay to feel angry about it. I exhaled, the weight of those questions settling heavily on me. What did you tell her? I told her it's okay to feel anything she feels, Mrs. Florence said with a small smile. And that it's not her fault. She seemed relieved to hear that. That night, as I tucked Haven into bed, I sat on the edge of her mattress and smoothed her hair. Mrs. Florence said you've been talking to her about Mommy, I said gently. Haven hesitated, then nodded. It's easier to talk to her sometimes. She listens, but she doesn't try to tell me what to think. I hugged her tightly, trying not to let my voice shake. You can always talk to me too, okay? About anything. She didn't answer, but the way she clung to me for a little longer than usual told me she'd heard me. It wasn't much, but it was something, a reminder that, no matter how hard Lana tried to spin things, the truth still mattered. The next supervised visit started like any other, with Lana greeting the girls and putting on her best Mom of the Year smile. I stayed in the waiting area, trying to keep my mind occupied. But this time Diane, the supervisor, called me in afterward. I thought you should know, Diane began carefully. Lana made some inappropriate comments today. My stomach tightened. What kind of comments? Diane hesitated. She told Haven that it's unfair you don't let her stay over and that you're keeping the family apart. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. Did she say anything else? She also hinted that you don't want the girls to see her because you're angry at her, Diane said, her tone serious. I reminded her that visits are about the children, not adult grievances, but the damage was done, I finished for her. Diane nodded. It's something we'll include in our report for the court. I just thought you'd want to be aware. Driving home with the girls, I couldn't stop replaying Diane's words in my head. Mila was chattering about the crafts they'd done, but Haven sat quietly, staring out the window. At bedtime, I decided to check in. Haven, is everything okay? She shrugged, then looked up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. Why doesn't Mommy just stay, Daddy? Why can't we all be together? My throat tightened. Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love, I said softly. But that doesn't mean it's your fault, okay? None of this is your fault. Haven didn't reply, but she hugged me tightly, and I held her until she let go. That night, I documented every word Diane said and everything Haven told me. Lana's games were starting to backfire, and I needed to make sure the court saw it. After Diane's report and Haven's questions, I knew I couldn't keep brushing off Lana's behavior. Her words were sinking into the girls' heads, creating confusion and doubt, and it was only going to get worse if I didn't act. I called Ren the next morning, laying everything out for him. She's twisting things in front of the kids, Ren. She's making me look like the bad guy and putting ideas in their heads about us being a family again. Good, Ren said flatly. I blinked, caught off guard. Good? How is that good? Because it's on record now, he explained. Diane's report carries weight. The court will see that Lana isn't focusing on what's best for the girls. She's focusing on herself. It strengthens our case. That gave me some relief, but it didn't fix the immediate problem. The girls were still carrying the burden of Lana's manipulation, and I didn't know how to help them through it without badmouthing their mother, a line I refused to cross. That weekend, I took Haven and Mila out for a Just Us day. We went to the park, had lunch at their favorite burger place, and spent the afternoon at an arcade. Mila lit up like a Christmas tree when she won a stuffed unicorn from the claw machine, and even Haven cracked a smile during laser tag. On the drive home, Haven surprised me by asking, "Do you think Mommy likes spending time with us?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course she does," I said carefully. "Then why did she leave?" Haven's voice was quiet, but her words hit me like a hammer. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, turning to face her. "That's a hard question, Haven," I admitted. "I don't know why Mommy made the choices she did. But what I do know is that she loves you and Mila. And no matter what, I love you too. That will never change." She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat on the couch with my notebook and wrote everything down. Every word, every moment, every tiny crack in their trust that Lana was trying to exploit. I didn't know if it would be enough, but I had to believe the truth would matter. In the following days, I started noticing little shifts in the girls. Mila was still her bubbly, excitable self, but she clung to me more than before, always wanting to sit in my lap or hold my hand. Haven, though, seemed caught between two worlds, wanting to trust Lana, but also questioning her intentions. One night, as I was tucking her in, she said, "Daddy, I don't think Mommy is telling the truth about everything." My heart skipped a beat. "Why do you say that?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes she says stuff that doesn't feel right. Like she's trying too hard." I hugged her tightly, my chest tight with pride and heartbreak. "You're so smart, Haven. I hope you know that. And it's okay to have questions. You can always ask me anything." She didn't say anything else, but her arms around my neck felt like the strongest connection we'd had in weeks. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cold beer, staring at the pile of paperwork Ron had prepared for the upcoming hearing. Lana might have been playing her games, but she underestimated one thing: I wasn't fighting alone. I had Haven, Mila, and a community behind me, rooting for us to come out stronger. The next visit was different, and not in a good way. When I dropped the girls off at the visitation center, Lana seemed tense. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and there was an edge to her tone when she greeted the girls. I didn't know what was coming, but I had a bad feeling. 2 hours later, Diane pulled me aside as I came to pick them up. "Lana was pushing boundaries today," she said, her face serious. "What kind of boundaries?" I asked, my stomach sinking. "She told the girls she's planning to move back into town and that it's just a matter of time before she gets to take them home with her," Diane explained. "She also made a comment about you being overprotective, which upset Haven." I clenched my jaw, anger bubbling under the surface. "And how did the girls react?" "Mila seemed excited," Diane said, hesitating. "But Haven—" She got quiet, like she didn't know what to believe. On the drive home, the girls were unusually quiet. Mila held her stuffed unicorn tightly, and Haven stared out the window, lost in thought. That night, as I tucked them in, Haven finally spoke. Mommy said she's going to live with us again. Is that true? I knelt by her bed, choosing my words carefully. Mommy and I are working on what's best for you and Mila. But no matter what happens, you'll always have a safe home here with me. Her eyes searched mine, and after a moment, she nodded. I trust you, Daddy. That simple statement hit me harder than anything Lana had said or done. It was a reminder of what I was fighting for, not just custody, but the trust and stability my daughters deserved. I documented everything Diane told me and Haven's reaction, determined to make it count in court. Lana's manipulation was starting to backfire, and I could only hope the judge would see it. The hearing was just around the corner, and I knew it was going to be a battle. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to Lana's moves. I was ready to stand my ground. The day of the custody hearing finally arrived, and my nerves were shot. I dropped the girls off with Mrs. Florence early in the morning, hugging them tightly and promising I'd pick them up later. Good luck, Daddy, Haven whispered, her arms wrapped around my neck. Ren and I met outside the courthouse. He was calm and collected, while I felt like I was holding my breath the entire time. Inside, Lana was already there, sitting with her lawyer. She looked composed, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. When she saw me, her smile was thin, almost smug. The hearing began with both sides presenting their cases. Lana's lawyer painted her as a mother who had made mistakes but was now reformed and ready to be a part of her daughters' lives. He brought up her therapy, her steady job, and her recent involvement in the girls' lives during the supervised visits. Ran, on the other hand, didn't pull any punches. He laid out the facts of Lana's abandonment, the emotional impact it had on the girls, and her attempts to manipulate them during the visits. He submitted Diane's reports and the documentation I'd kept of every questionable comment Lana had made. When it was my turn to speak, I focused on the girls. They've been through enough, I said, my voice steady despite the weight of the moment. They need stability, not promises. I've been their anchor since the day Lana left, and I'm asking the court to let me continue being that for them. Lana spoke after me, her voice wavering with practiced emotion. She apologized for leaving, claimed she'd needed time to heal, and insisted she was ready to be a full-time mother again. The judge listened carefully, asking questions and reviewing the evidence. It was a long, grueling day, and by the end of it, I felt like I'd run a marathon. Finally, the judge made his decision. He commended both parents for their love for the girls, but noted that Lana's abandonment and behavior during visits raised concerns about her priorities. Mitch, the judge said, turning to me, I'm granting you full physical and legal custody of Haven and Mila. Lana, you'll have supervised visitation twice a month, with the possibility of expanding to unsupervised visits after 6 months, pending evaluation. Relief washed over me, but it was bittersweet. This wasn't a victory, it was a necessity. As we left the courthouse, Ren patted me on the back. You did good, Mitch, he said. I picked up the girls from Mrs. Florence's and took them out for ice cream to celebrate something they didn't even realize had happened. For them, nothing had changed. For me, everything had. That night, as I tucked them in, Haven hugged me tight. I knew you'd keep us safe, Daddy, she whispered. Her words stayed with me long after they'd fallen asleep. Lana's actions had tested us, but we'd come out stronger. My girls were safe, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like we could finally move forward.